Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Greg Hutchins. Good morning, Fred. How are you?
Hey, pretty good, Greg. I'm doing well. I know that we're coming up on a weekend and it's hot all over the place, so I imagine you're heading to the beach.
Actually, we're going to the Oregon Country Fair, where I'm going to wear a tutu, a pink tutu, and mingle with a crowd.
Okay. I hope you get plenty of, liquid to keep you going if it's hot and all that good stuff. But that sounds like you're pushing the boundaries there a little bit. You were talking about it before we hit record, that you were talking to a friend that knew you as the conservative buttoned up type person. And when you mentioned the pink tutu, there was a long pause. Was that the reaction you were expecting?
Well, I just wanted to say I wanted to liberate myself and expose a little bit of being a little bit more candid, because most of the time I come across in terms of these webinars as being pretty conservative, the voice of management, the voice of reason, and the voice of getting things done.
Well, you just destroyed that reason part, but whatever. But one of the things that, when you mentioned that earlier, I was thinking, it's a double-edged sword. Is if you don't do something you've never done before, right? It's really hard to learn it to know whether it's something you want to keep doing or not. If you run into a brick wall head first really fast, you probably learn to sense where brick walls are and try not to run into them head first. Some people learn it the first time, some never learn it. But the idea is that we learn by our mistakes. And I look at the same way in product development and asset management, is that failure is going to happen. And I think there was a motto here in the Silicon Valley area is, fail fast kind of thing. But the idea is that if you don't know where the boundaries are, it's really hard to know where the edges are, where the sweet spot is, what's possible, what's not possible. And the building prototypes and only doing tests to pass and really pampering the whole process so that you only get passing tests is, in my opinion, a formula for having a really crappy product that's likely going to fail pretty easily or quickly. In professional development, if you've never done design of experiments before, and it seems like that might be the right tool to use to solve the next problem you got on your table, on your plate, on your inbox, I should say. If you're not willing to go learn enough about that new tool because you've never done it before, because you don't want to go outside your comfort area, you lose the opportunity to add a lot of value by bringing the appropriate tool to solve a problem. So when I think of pushing the limits, I don't tend to think about pink tutus. That got me started on it. You need to know where the boundaries are. And one of the best ways to find it is to cross them.
Okay. Boy, we have different interpretations again. First of all,
it's Thursday. That's what we do.
That's what we do. That's exactly right. First of all, to define boundaries, you have to have a boundary. You have to have something before you do it. I'm finding myself in a situation where I'm a fail fast type of person. I try things, and I can give you an example. I basically, and I'm a great believer in being totally transparent and candid. I wrote the two best books, the two first books in ISO, 42,000. They've had god-awful reviews in Amazon. Huh. But I accepted that because I was first to market. My metric for success was first to market. And here's the problem about boundary conditions. You have to try and then do before you can do boundary conditions. I don't think people test enough. I don't think people do stuff enough before they can establish boundary conditions.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, I totally agree. It's not just do whatever you want. It's pay attention to the feedback, the responses, did this thing blow up or not? I think of halt testing as we deliberately add stress step at a time until it fails. And it's not to say it failed. It's to say where it failed. It's why did, let's go do the analysis and figure out, well, did this plastic melt? And what's our use conditions? All right, well, we might not be able to use that polymer blend anymore. We got to use something stronger. It's to learn something, right? And
further, I would go a step further back. Did you do the test? Why did you do the test? What are you trying to learn from it? And are you using the right test?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's true. I agree with you there wholeheartedly. If you're trying to estimate, will this product last 20 years? HALT is a tool to help you figure out how it will fail. And then you can go figure out how long before it fails, but they're generally mutually exclusive. We go create failures. That's a piece of knowledge we need to figure out, well, how long before those failures occur, which is a different approach or different test. I have a lot of, it's not pet peeve quality yet, but it's the folks that do the bunch of standard tests and they all test to pass. But we did 77 samples. It says, yeah, and the conditions were such that if you did 7,000 samples, you'd still never get a failure.
That's right. Still be the same.
Yeah.
So that begs the question, so what?
Yeah. I ask that all the time.
And negative about this, Fred.
Oh, I agree. It's that, I ask the sales guys, he's touting all this stuff on their data sheet, and I say, all right, so what? You passed all those tests. How does that interpret into anything useful for me to understand if your product works in my environment? Blah, blah. Well, it passed this and this 5-digit standard and this 15.7 Class C standard. I'm like, I don't care.
And who cares? That's right. Who cares? And from the management point of view, when you have to justify the time for the test, we'll say, okay, how does this give me more money or save me more money?
Mm-hmm. How do am we going to learn something that we actually need to know, is the way I phrase it.
Yes, exactly. And I'm seeing so much of the quality profession. And you could probably, put reliability under that, asking the wrong questions.
Yep. No, I get that.
It really comes down to what questions are really important to move the needle. And what's the needle?
Yeah. What measure are you using? Yeah.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, Carl and I really tried to express that. There's no fixed set of tests or tools that creates a reliable product that meets your needs. And in that, unpacking that just a little bit, is we spend a whole lot of time talking about, well, what are you trying to achieve? What works or doesn't work in your market and for your business. You can make a really, really reliable product and it costs a fortune, but nobody buys it. That's kind of a silly approach. Vice versa, if you make a product that's really, really cheap and doesn't meet the customer's minimum expectation of how long it should last, you're also toast. It's not going to be a viable long-term solution. So really understanding what you're trying to achieve is a starting point. And yeah, startups come up and they create a disruptive technology and unfortunately, they may get judged by a very mature technology that just happens to last longer than a customer expects. A very reliable car. Somebody makes a brand new type of car, but it only lasts 6 weeks. That's going to be a tough sell. And so the limit or the boundary in the reliability point of view there is, well, what's the expectation? And you might get a grace period. If this technology is super cool, and you get a great cool factor of it, there will be people that'll buy it and deal with the recalls and deal with the maintenance and so on, because the value is not in whether it actually works or not. But that's my facetious kind of look at some of these things. The boundaries in customer's point of view is independent to the customer, the individual customer. And if you get 10 of them together, you're going to get 10 sets of boundaries of what it is expected of your product. That makes it a bit of a difficult adventure to create a product that works.
Okay, so let me try to unpack some of this from the customer's point of view. again, depending upon the product they're buying. And I've got stories on that. Branding is so hugely important. So, an example that happened this morning, I had a wife, operative had a wife, who bought $3,000 to $5,000 handbags. LV, Chanel, you name it, right?
Yeah.
She just loved buying handbags. She's Asian, and she had an addiction to buying handbags. And she bought them for the brand value, and it was performative. She would wear it, and all of her Asian friends would say, "Oh, you married right. You did
Doing
the
well.
right."
Yeah. You got
Exactly. And all that was performative.
Yeah.
My favorite word of the day.
Okay.
But from the customer point of view, for buying a Chanel handbag is hugely important. All branding. And by the way, a $4,000 bag, we found out this week, cost $60 to make.
Well, but it holds lipstick and, and whatever the car keys just
We're
fine.
not talking functionality. We're talking about, how does this product make you feel? Is the brand.
Makes you feel it and be perceived. Yeah.
And by the way, what I just discussed are the boundary conditions.
Yeah.
Because I think before we started this discussion, we should have defined boundary conditions. The boundary conditions for a Chanel bag are branding, perceived luxury.
Those are the measures of it.
Those are the measures.
But it's also for a select clientele. It's not for the person that just wants something to hold their wallet.
And that's what we define when we say boundary conditions. We should have defined that, by the way, earlier on when we had this podcast. Boundary conditions are clientele, Asian woman, mid-40s, mid-30s, who basically buys it. And these are the performative things that are important for her. For a product, we have similar things such as reliability, conformance,
performance,
spec, CPKs, whatever, meeting a FEMA,
It's such a blurry line, though. Somebody's going to buy from a particular vendor because of their reputation and brand performance, perceived performance even. And they'll buy that piece of equipment or have it designed by that particular outfit or design team or whatever. Branding goes beyond the spec sheet.
But as part of depending upon who the customer is, those are the boundary conditions.
Yeah.
For a reliability product where, you don't like mean time to failure, mean time and blah, blah, blah,
we don't talk about that term here.
No, we don't. And I love that concept, but still, you say tomatoes, I say tomatoes, right? You say ascendo, I say.
Now you can't even do the old way.
I can't say the normal.
Yeah. No, reliability is kind of tricky though. I think it's one of those measures or metrics that for many products, not all products, but for many applications and everything else, even if that Chanel bag or whatever brand LV, if it's poorly stitched such that the first time I put my car keys in it, it rips through the bottom. Well, it doesn't matter if it's a $3,000 bag or not. It's got a hole in the bottom. And that, even though I wasn't meant to carry anything, that wasn't its primary purpose. Now I have to carry a second purse or have you coming along with the car keys and everything else, which ruins and there's a rip or a tear, obvious defect in it. Now the prestige and all the perception values and feel good values and stuff is gone. So even with luxury products, as I'll loosely term them, is that they have to have a certain level of performance or reliability. Otherwise, it loses that prestige pretty quick. So I think it's still part of the mix, yet it's not the dominant reason people buy it.
But I know what the boundary conditions of a luxury item are.
Yeah.
I have sometimes a hard time from a technical point of view defining the boundary conditions of a reliability experiment.
Well, so that's I'm going to go back to Carl and I mean, the first step is, what is the objective and goal and how you're measuring it and what's the long-term and short-term objectives and so on. And then we break it down to, well, what are the major decisions? What information needs to be created so that you can make an informed decision? And it might be collecting data, it might be grilling models, it might be running tests, it might be whatever it is, but doesn't start with, oh, we need to go test this. It starts with, what information do you need by when and who needs it and why? Then testing may be the appropriate way to get that information. Then you go design and run your test. So that the question of why you're doing it is starting by, Greg in the management suite over there needs to know if this will last for 10 years or not without ripping out. All right? So we're going to design a test to answer that question with sufficient detail that it helps you make the decision, this is good enough or not.
Okay, but Greg and management over there invests in your time and your test for something that'll bring value or return on investment for me.
Right.
How do you know? I mean, have you basically vetted what you're doing in terms of your reliability test to Greg management?
That's a key concept of it, is if I go run a test and you get it and you go, what's this? This is silly. I don't understand it. Then you failed. You failed in the process of creating the test. That actually part of the process, and it's not just for testing, whether we do FMEAs or testing or modeling or whatever it is, part of the selection process of what you go do is connected to that decision and that decision maker or group of decision makers. What is it that you need, to what detail, to what fidelity, to what accuracy, such that, and it's a balance, right? If we say they want to know 10 years plus or minus 6 minutes or whatever, and we come back and say, well, that'll cost us $6 million and take 10 to 15 years to do. It's a non-starter for most people.
From my point of view, that's the only question. What's going to be different if you conducted this test that makes my life easier, better, faster, cheaper, whatever.
Whatever. But it also has to be, if I go off and do a beautiful, perfect test, yet it's on exactly the wrong detail that was the question to start with. If somebody wants to know if this hinge is working and I go test keyboards because I think of all the hinges that are in the keyboard, then I do I call it a type 3 error. You perfectly solve the exact wrong problem, kind of thing. So part of that process of, it's really a break from this mindset of, well, here's a set of tests that we run that we can compare to last time. And I've run into so many circumstances where, why are you doing this test? Well, we have to compare it to last time. Well, what information are you learning that you don't already know? Well, nothing. Who gets these reports? Nobody. It's just in case. And you're spending tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars doing something that nobody really cares about. How about we figure out what people care about and need to know, then go spend the money to get that information. And it's really a focus on, if we need to know how it fails, we got a brand new widget and nobody's ever used this box before and so on, or it's a new user interface. Is it understandable or not? Mm-hmm. Well, let's go find out. Let's go answer that question, and get that information in a meaningful way, as opposed to, well, we're only going to check the specs, and the specs say it has to turn on, and we get a little green light. All right. And we spend all day checking the green light, but we don't check what's important. We don't answer the questions that are top of mind for the people that are making the decisions, whether to invest in this product or manufacture this product or ship the product or risk the brand reputation on it or whatever.
And Greg management wants to know that.
Yeah. No, I agree. I totally agree with that.
And the biggest problem that I've seen, and this is a problem that I think that Ascendo, however we pronounce that, should address, is you teach great courses, great technical material, but we need to teach how quality and reliability engineers work with managers to understand what's important to them.
Well, I see a whole series of podcasts coming out of this.
Well, because I mean, the reliability engineer is perfect. They know what they're doing. They have a PhD, blah, blah, blah. But does it really matter to the decision maker? And the decision maker is going to ask, and very seldom, by the way, are they ever asked, what's top of mind? Why are we doing this? How can I help you make money? Engage in the conversation.
Yep. Yeah. No, the only short answer to this, Greg, is buy the book, read it.
Yeah, you mean buy your book?
Yeah, of course. But it's and then it goes credit back to you, Greg. We've been talking about this kind of stuff for a decade, and pretty sure it's been 10 years or so. Yeah, but it's one of those things that to be successful is in some part making other people successful. And if you're not the one making the decisions, well, then how can you influence those decisions so that we get it right 9 times out of 10 versus 50-50? It's all part of it. Well, we wandered way off of, pushing the limits. I guess we're pushing the limits of our topic here, but it's important.
I think understanding what the decision maker wants is part of the boundary conditions.
Yep. And I would add that it's what motivates your customers or clients or users or, purchasers or whoever is, if they're only interested in X, Y, and Z, and you won't make any sales unless those things meet their criteria, well, then that's kind of becomes important. Not always. You might be pushing the boundaries of finding new customers, yet those are discussions that in the test lab we tend not to consider very often.
Part of the thing that I like to discuss, and I want to discuss now, is how often do you, as a reliability engineer, actually help shape the product life cycle or the product that you're basically working with? Because if you do, then you're adding value. If you don't, I don't think you're part of the discussion.
Yeah, no, you're a cost center, unfortunately, at that point.
Absolutely. Cost center, and guess what?
Cost reduction is usually a common technique that's used.
I'm not going to say that.
Yeah. I agree. It's if you're not part of that table and discussion and so on, and if you're in, one of the easiest ways to become part of that is accomplish things and connect it to why it makes a difference. What's the value of it? How did this save us money or save us time or reduce risk or whatever it is that is important for that particular group or decision makers, that culture? I don't know. It might be time for me to brush off because we got a good stable of courses on the site now. I should brush off my course on, well, how do you document the value you add? How do you participate in that conversation of, like you said, Greg, is influencing the product life cycle, not being a victim of it.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. So do we want to wrap this goodie up?
Yeah, no, we don't want to push the boundary of doing an hour, 20-minute topic.
Absolutely.
We could, we can do that, But the idea is that, you got to think about what you're doing, and there's no doubt about it. So if you've got some thoughts on this or what helps you understand where the edges are and stuff, and it goes from testing, and as Greg brings up, are you even doing the right tests? What are the boundaries that say you have to do this or not do this? And what are the motivators or drivers of that? Let us know. Where do you see the limits or boundaries in the work that we do and the types of activities we participate in? Or if you're going to a county fair or whatever, the country fair, you got lots of options to learn and push elements and try stuff and fail and learn and try again. what's working for you, what's not. Let us know. Greg and I are available through LinkedIn and our about pages on Ascendo. Plus, you can go to ascendoreliability.com/go/SOR. There's a couple of ways to get in touch with us there. Always looking for good comments and questions. It's been a little bit slow so far this summer, so I'm looking for a good flush of questions as we get into the next set of recording sessions. So let us know. We always appreciate your insights and input and questions, and would love to talk about the various topics you bring up. So with that, Greg, we'll see how many boundary pushing questions we get.
Yeah, and here I am in my 70s, and if I'm pushing boundaries by wearing a tutu at Burning Man and Oregon Country Fair, we recommend you push boundaries too. So anyway, have a great summer, folks.
All right. Talk to you soon, Greg.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.